This is White Plains Week, the weekly roundup of White Plains, Westchester, and world news. With John Bailey, editor and publisher of the daily internet newspaper White Plains Citizen Net Reporter, WPCNR.com. Jim Benneroff, editor and publisher of SuburbanStreet.com and WhitePlains.com. And me, Peter Katz, formerly with NBC, ABC News, and stations from Boston to Los Angeles. White Plains Week, what's happening? Who are the newsmakers? What's in store for the future? The views and opinions expressed on this program are solely those of the participants. White Plains Week is presented on Optimum Cable Channel 76, Verizon Fios Channel 45, and on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com, youtube.com, and wpcommunitymedia.org. Now, White Plains Week.
Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. White Plains and Westchester and the world. John Bailey, White Plains Week with Peter Katz, the anchor for all seasons. And it's a new year. And here are the headlines. White Plains welcomed in 2018 Sunday night in the coldest New Year's Eve in years. On the last day of the old year, on Sunday, a White Plains fireman fought a stubborn fire in a house on Park Avenue, did a terrific job of preventing the blaze from spreading to other houses. 20-degree weather continued all week with a drifting, blizzardy snow closing White Plains schools Thursday and Friday. State Senator George Latimer was sworn in as Westchester County's 9th county executive, and the next day banned gun shows on Westchester County property. Mr. Latimer also requested an audit of the Westchester County budget by State Comptroller Thomas DiNapoli to see where the county is at. Justin Brash was sworn in on Sunday as a new councilman in White Plains, replacing Beth Smeda, who decided she would not run for re-election. Hezzy Harris, editor of the Yonkers Tribune, reports Mike Spano, mayor of Yonkers, will withdraw from seeking Mr. Latimer's state Senate seat. Mr. Harris reports Shelley Meyer of the Assembly's 90th District, also from Yonkers, is the front runner. Westchester County sales taxes were up in November and are on target for a $17 million surplus over last year, a 3.4% increase. Meanwhile, White Plains is even with last year after 5 months of their fiscal year. Constellation Energy reported its energy sources and carbon emissions performance of its sources to its sustainable Westchester Power customers, of which I am one. The results are shocking. More shocking cold weather is due this weekend. Temperatures in the single digits are expected, and New York Presbyterian Lawrence Hospital warns that frostbite hypothermia can happen very quickly, especially if you're out sledding, skating, or skiing. Coming up on January 18th, the Dr. Martin Luther King breakfast at the Crowne Plaza. Call up the Thomas Slater Center for tickets. And right now, Peter, it's time to go to the first Rolo newsreel of 2018. And White Plains welcomed in the New Year Sunday night in frigid weather, which kept the crowds in the restaurants, police said, but they left the warmth and filled the Renaissance Square about 11:30. These are Mayor Roach's pictures on the magic 2018 moment in White Plains, New York, and some live video shot by the White Plains crew.
Yes, actually there was live coverage of the ball drop here in White Plains, and in many ways some people thought that the coverage of White Plains was better than what you were seeing on CNN from Times Square.
Yes.
Here's a little clip of what it was like as the crowds came out of the restaurants and bars and assembled at the intersection of Mamaroneck Avenue and Main Street. And there was plenty of entertainment.
And jumping up and down.
A good time was had by all, but you know, it's actually a little dangerous to be out in weather like that unless you are thoroughly prepared for it and thoroughly warmly dressed.
And well lubricated.
And, you know, even after we had this enormous storm come up the East Coast yesterday, we got somewhat clobbered here in White Plains. It looked on the deck in my yard as if we had about a foot of snow. But going out to clean it up, you really had to be dressed in multiple layers. You had to be sure that there was practically no skin exposed to this.
That's
because
for sure.
the winds, we didn't have it quite as strong in White Plains, but some places affected by the storm had tropical storm force winds. What this was really was almost a wintertime hurricane. Looking at a satellite photograph of the storm,
Peter.
you could see that there was the same kind of rotary circulation you find in a hurricane, and there even was an eye formed by this storm. It was massive, totally disruptive. The transportation system in the New York area was disrupted. Nationwide, the air travel situation was horrendous trying to get around because thousands and thousands of flights were canceled. For a time, the New York airports, Kennedy, LaGuardia, Westchester, had to be closed simply because it was impossible to keep up with the accumulation of snow, ice, and also the high winds. Very, very dangerous flying conditions.
Right, and in New England, they got 18 inches.
And Boston itself, for the first time that anyone can recall, had flooding on the streets of downtown Boston because of the excessive high tide and a storm surge coupled with it.
Yeah, it was a full month.
So you had, not only the streets of downtown Boston covered in floodwaters, but the floodwaters had ice flows in them. It was really quite remarkable.
It was a real blast of winter. And
now, of course, President Trump insists that this proves that there's no such thing as global warming, but in actual fact, anyone who knows anything about the way the weather works knows that, number one, climate change is long-term, and it has nothing to do with individual weather events. But number two, the individual weather events we're seeing are more powerful than they have been in the past because global warming pumps more energy into the atmosphere. So what we are experiencing right now and will experience in a deep freeze over this weekend is changes in the jet stream. The jet streams which go across the country from west to east have been pulled further south because of the energy that's been pumped in to cause more churning of the atmosphere due to global warming. And as a result, we have seen remarkably low temperatures in our area. It's been cold all the way down into the south. They had snow in Florida. Snow in Florida yesterday.
Very weird. In fact, there are three shockers to start the year, and there they are. There was the snow at the end of the week, cold all week long, and just before New Year ended, there was a fire at 1618 Park Avenue. Firemen worked 5 hours to put out a fire, the cause of which has not yet been determined. Fire Chief Richard Lyman, in a statement, said the fire department responded at 12:10, and it took till 5:30 p.m. to get it under control. He said cold weather complicates fighting a fire and makes it more difficult to extinguish. Water freezes on the ground, ladders, roofs, firefighters, and creates a dangerous working environment. Hose lines and nozzles can freeze, making lines inoperable. Low temperatures and wind chill can cause hypothermia and frostbite. He said the crew did a fantastic job under the circumstances and no injuries to firefighters or residents, and it didn't spread to other houses.
Well, you know, fire is a real hazard when you get into cold weather like this because it's so difficult to fight. It's difficult just to walk around. And indeed, the water does freeze. Everything becomes iced over. We have seen other fires in the New York metro area. There was a really bad one in the Bronx during the cold snap, which went to, I believe, 7 alarms, which is a pretty big fire.
7 companies, that means.
And being a firefighter is no picnic normally, but in
Very
weather
brave.
like this, it's just incredibly
Very brave
hazardous.
and incredibly tough. I tell you, being out in that weather, it was just awful Sunday. And the chief also said that the second leading cause of fires like this in the winter nationwide are equipment malfunctions, and the second leading cause of home fires nationwide includes portable and fixed space heaters, electrical and lighting distribution equipment, fixed wiring, meter switches, receptacles.
Very often people will just keep plugging in and plugging in electric heaters,
And they get
you
shorts.
overload.
Yeah.
Well, it's not a short circuit, but you overload. You cause the wires themselves to overheat because they're not designed to be carrying such loads. And once that happens, you get a fire that can start inside of a wall, and once it's in the wall, good luck.
But we are so lucky that the White Plains Fire Department is so professional and is on duty 24/7 and get there instantly, and they saved a lot of houses because of their professionalism Sunday. And then January 1st was highlighted by George Latimer being sworn in as a Westchester County Executive, and on Tuesday had a news conference fulfilling a promise. Peter, you have the story.
Well, actually, Latimer is going to have an inauguration followed by a reception at noon this coming Sunday, January 7th. Now, this is the public swearing-in ceremony, and it's going to be at Westchester Community College. But he actually took office earlier this week with members of the news media, his staff, and a few others on hand.
On New Year's Day, George Latimer was sworn in as Westchester County Executive by State Supreme Court Judge Gretchen Walsh. The swearing-in took place in his new office on the 9th floor of the county's McCallion office building in White Plains. He announced that he's sending a formal request asking State Controller Thomas DiNapoli to review county finances, including policies and procedures.
We want to make sure that we know exactly where we are fiscally as we begin this new administrative year. We have a long road ahead of us. We have that road together. And we need to know exactly where we are and where we're going. The State Controller's operation is tasked with verifying the validity of the state budget and ultimately the oversight of all local governments throughout the state. And we want to understand and be sure exactly where we are, our policies and our procedures, not merely just to make sure that the numbers add up as you do in a fiscal audit, but programmatically that we are doing the things we have to do. And if there are suggestions and changes in our policies, things that might affect our bond rating, things that affect our ability to meet our obligations, that we should know about it. And we should know about it not just as an administration, but the legislature should know about it, the press should know about it, and the public should know about it.
Latimer announced an executive order to keep his name and the names of current county officials off of directional, informational, and promotional signs at county facilities.
So by executive order, you will not see my name as county executive when you enter Playland or when you're at the airport in any kind of a situation. This is a practice of the past that has gone on for many, many years. Many prior county executives and perhaps in some ways other elected officials have done that. But we believe it's time for us to sort of change the direction of how we view these things and just do it very simply. All of these facilities are owned by the people of Westchester. Their effort, their tax dollars, their faith have put these things into place. It is not the possession of any one county executive over any period of time. And as surely as I have taken on this position, the day will come where I will turn this position over to someone else.
He announced formation of a task force for a fresh look at sharing services and resources among various levels of government. He announced a social media campaign to involve residents in promoting the county. It would be called #MyWestchester. And he also announced a good neighbor policy.
We are not subject legally to the laws of the municipalities where our facilities are based. But as a good neighbor, I want to make sure that this county government, and certainly through its executive branch arm, involves the local governments, wherever they may be, whenever we have a major action or change to make on a county-owned facility.
After his announcement, he sat down at his new desk to sign the request to DiNapoli and the executive order on the signs. When asked by the Westchester County Business Journal, Latimer said they will be taking a close look at his predecessor's plans for the county airport and the pending management deal for
We're
Playland.
going to start with a fresh set of eyes, evaluate them in light of the priorities that we have, which may or may not differ from the prior administration. If we wind up having a change in direction of negotiations, we'll certainly share that with you. We understand that the airport issue involves quite a bit of money, which was predicated on the budget that was adopted by the Board of Legislators over the veto of my predecessor. So we understand there's an economic issue at hand. But there are other factors involved, and so we'll try to address them, along with many other priorities, as fast as we can.
And his take on the expectations of voters.
The people in this county who are successful in all the things that they do, in finance and law and medicine and academia, and the creation and management of large businesses and small businesses, they're not fooled by style. They look at style and they appreciate it, but they want to see substance. And that's what we intend to deliver, but it will take time.
And Latimer plunged right in the following day by going over to the Westchester County Center, which had been in the bullseye of a great controversy over the gun shows that were being run there. And along with members of the County Board of Legislators and a couple of gun control advocates, they set themselves up in the lobby of the county center on Tuesday, and the new county executive signed an executive order immediately banning gun shows and sales of guns on county property.
When they're going to start, you know, they go to school and stuff like, oh, there's no saying.
She's still making phone calls.
I'm signing into effect an executive order which for the duration of this administration will ban having gun shows here at the Westchester County Center. The policy to do that was originally established by my predecessor 2 executives ago, Andy Spano, back in 1999 in the aftermath of the Columbine shooting in Colorado. I was a member of the Board of Legislators at that time. I was chairman of the Board of Legislators, and the sense of the board at that time, as well as the county executive, is that this venue, which was created decades ago and is a tremendous showplace for Westchester County, is a showplace for family entertainment and for family programs and services. If you look at the different items, the different events that we have coming here, it's obviously the home for the Westchester Knicks, developmental league for the NBA New York Knicks. Over the course of the next month, there's going to be a bridal expo here. We're going to have cheerleading invitational competition here, a Playland job fair, and who knows, maybe we'll have Section 1 basketball back here as well, depending on what happens in our discussions. But the bottom line is that this center has always been a place for those types of family values. And I think former County Executive Andy Spano rightfully understood that in the aftermath of what happened in Columbine, we needed to make the right kind of statement that certain types of things would not be appropriate here, even if they're legal and even if they're appropriate to be elsewhere in a private setting in Westchester County. So the action that I'm taking today commits Westchester County government to not hold the gun shows here. We'll assume I have a 4-year tenure over the next 4 years. Now, the Board of Legislators has every opportunity, and I would welcome it if they choose to, in their wisdom, to legislate on this topic. The process of legislation is longer than an executive order, so I put this executive order in today to be binding immediately so that no efforts are made by the staff here to solicit having the gun show in future years.
We, the Board of Legislators, will work to implement laws that we will ban them permanently because, as you know, an executive order can be overturned by the next executive, but we want to put legislation in place that will be there in perpetuity to make sure that we do not have these shows on county-owned property, and we will immediately move to do that.
And Ben Boykin, we remember him from the Common Council in White Plains.
Right.
On the legislature, he represents a large chunk of White Plains and Scarsdale and some other areas too.
Right. Now, the figures are in for sales tax receipts in November, Peter. With 1 month to go, Westchester County is 3.8% ahead in sales tax receipts. If they hit $51.3 million for December, they will have a $17 million surplus in sales tax receipts, 3.4% ahead of 2016. Good news for the Westchester economy. The possible $17 million surplus is what former County Executive Astorino said he needed from the airport lease deal to balance the budget. And speaking of counting, White Plains, with a good November, is even with its 2016 pace for the year at $25.6 million if we get the $5 million sales tax receipts White Plains got last year in December. So White Plains is even, the county is almost 4% ahead in receipts. And those of you participating in the Sustainable Westchester Power 24-city power pricing plan, giving you the green energy rate, received a letter this week telling you what your electricity generating sources were. It shows, Peter, that 90% of the electricity green energy people got was generated by water, solar, nuclear, natural gas, and wind. However, the shocker is that air pollution emissions in the 2016 year from generation of the mostly green sources were 111% of the New York State average. So, though we're economizing on the solar, we haven't yet tackled that emissions problem. And in April and May, you will get your new rates from Constellation Services or whoever wins the contract with Sustainable Westchester. And that is now time for a look at what Donald Trump, the president, did this week.
The New York Times reports that Special Counsel Robert Mueller has substantiated the claims made by fired FBI Director James Comey about President Trump and the pressure he was exerting to try to kill the FBI's investigation into White House Security Advisor Michael Flynn. That would be obstruction of justice by Trump. The Trump administration right now is putting pressure on Attorney General Sessions to unrecuse himself from the Russia investigation, presumably so Sessions can fire Special Counsel Robert Mueller and shut down the investigation into Trump's business dealings and any Trump campaign collusion with Russia to steal the election. There's a report that Trump ordered White House lawyer Don McGahn to pressure Sessions not to recuse himself. In the first place, Sessions, of course, had to recuse himself to abide by the regulations because he was involved in the Trump campaign, which is the subject of the special counsel's investigation. Trump has shut down the special commission he appointed to investigate what he claimed was widespread voter fraud in the election. Vice President Pence was having this commission do some of its work in secret, cutting out some of its members, who then had to sue to try to find out what was going on. No one has been unable to produce even a hint of evidence that there was any fraudulent voting, but Trump keeps telling that big lie over and over again, and he plans to continue pushing his plan to make everyone who wants to vote get a government identification card that his administration would issue, just like they do in dictatorships, where the only ones who can vote are the people who will vote for the dictator. He has told the Department of Homeland Security to take up where the defunct commission has left off and investigate the non-existent voter fraud and come up with a special report to justify going after yet another of our rights. The publication date of the new book, Fire and Fury Inside the Trump White House by Michael Wolff, has been pushed up to today. That's how severe the shockwaves have been from pre-publication releases of the content of the book. Wolff was given free and full access to the Trump White House. He conducted some 200 interviews, including with Trump, and he reports on what he observed and what people told him, and some of it is dynamite, such as Trump's temper tantrums, his mindless wandering, his loss of memory, his constantly repeating himself, his inability to read or concentrate on staff briefings. Trump's closest advisors, such as Steve Bannon, called Trump stupid, incompetent, and dangerous. Bannon told Wolff that the meeting Donald Trump Jr. and others had with Russians in Trump Tower was treasonous. Bannon blasted daughter Ivanka as being dumb as a brick. Wolff reports that wife Melania cried on election night when she learned they won because she dreaded the idea of becoming First Lady. Trump himself looked like a ghost because he was planning to lose and cash in on the name recognition he had gained in the campaign by expanding his real estate and resort businesses and starting a right-wing TV network to compete with Fox. It exposes his personal problems, such as his fixation on hiding his big bald spot. He and Melania sleeping in separate bedrooms, and his insistence that only he and not the White House domestic staff can take off the sheets from his bed in the morning. Trump's personal lawyers have threatened to sue to stop publication. The book is out. It's published. Too late for that. But this threat of the lawsuit would be interesting, since if they go ahead and sue, Trump and a bunch of other people would then likely have to give depositions under oath.
And prove it's not true.
On the Today Show this morning, Wolf, when interviewed, said he has notes and he has tapes.
Right. I'd be very careful if I agree.
Trump has taken credit for this country's exceptional safety record in aviation, specifically no airline deaths in accidents during 2017. Of course, Trump had absolutely nothing to do with aviation safety. Trump is planning to open up the U.S. coastal waters to an unprecedented level of offshore oil drilling. His administration will go even further to weaken environmental protections despite the oil rig fires, spills, and blowouts of the past. Governors of affected coastal states are expected to sue to try to stop it. When North Korea's Kim Jong-un warned that he takes threats against his country seriously and has a nuclear button on his desk, Trump tweeted that he also has a nuclear button, and it is bigger than Kim Jong-un's nuclear button, and it works. The parallel to the male anatomy was lost on no one, in addition to being more evidence of just how juvenile and immature Donald Trump can be. It's frightening and an imbecilic thing to do in a world where provocation and miscalculation can result in a nuclear conflagration. Wow. That book is something.
It just gets better every week, doesn't it?
I have ordered that book.
You have?
I have.
We can read from it. Well, be that as it may, it's going to be cold again going into this weekend, folks. And the New York Presbyterian Lawrence Hospital says you should take precautions against the cold, such as limiting exposure, layering clothing, keeping an eye on children and the elderly who may not be aware of the effects of the cold, awareness of the signs of frostbite and hypothermia, as well as other dangers. You should look into that, because, man, it is really bad. And I was just out this morning fixing the cars, and my face was getting very tingly after only about 5 to 8 minutes. Frostbite
can set in before you realize it. The other thing you really want to be careful about these days is carbon monoxide poisoning. You want to be sure that your heating system is properly maintained. There are no leaks.
And monitor your water levels. Meanwhile, all the monitoring of White Plains Week has just ended right now. John Bailey, Peter Katz, and for Jim Beneroff, good night for White Plains Week.
This has been White Plains Week, news and commentary about White Plains, Westchester, and the world. The views and opinions expressed on this program were solely those of the participants. White Plains Week, produced by White Plains Citizen Net Reporter and presented on Optimum Cable Channel 76 and Verizon Fios Channel 45. You may view White Plains Week anytime on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com, youtube.com, and wpcommunitymedia.org. For White Plains Week, this is Peter Katz speaking.